Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review The Babadook. I had gone on and watched this thing called Scream 2022. And so, of course, we have a character in that movie who is to say that her favorite film is Babadook. And really, I would say that this girl has zero taste in movie, as well as her just kind of rattling off movies that she had probably just Google searched 10 seconds beforehand. It's like, oh, the horror genre? Let's just Google it and figure out what horror genre movie is to be there. And let's just say the most diverse film that I can come up with that is my favorite because I've never went into a horror genre before in my life. As well as it seems like that movie was to just be the copy and paste of the very first Scream movie. That go ahead and check out the review or check out that movie. I'll give you a way to see if you can see the film bootleg style. So speaking of bootleg style, I think right now there's a couple of apps you can in fact watch this movie. I think Sling is where this is to be at right now. But I will recommend you two apps to be able to go on to. You can Google search these apps. One of them is called Letter C Movies, so it's a letter and then a word. You can go on to search this app and in fact download it and be able to watch seemingly anything for free. Really just anything that your heart's content. At some point that movie will probably be searchable in that app. If not, you can go and also Google search a app called Fox HD Movies. The title will say Fox HD Movies. The title will say something different. It'll say play 1080p HD, blee, 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 blee. That's all, folks. And so you can go on and combine the powers of these two apps to be able to pretty much see anything for absolutely free. Really, you could also go on and compile that with another app on the Google Play Store called TV Crush, and there's some times where you can get a subtitled thing from that you probably wouldn't be able to from, of course, certain other kinds of things. So with that said, let's go out of our way. Heaven forbid I talk, right? Let's go out of our way to go on and talk about more about Babadook. So this movie has to be in its own category because I would have to dub this movie because I've gone on and dubbed movies to be at some point awful, at some point to be bad, at some point to be okay or something to watch. I would honestly have to create a brand new category for this film, and the category is to be this thing called annoying. This movie is to be the most annoying movie I have ever watched. I was interested into this film, and then 9 minutes and 40 seconds in, I completely had lost that interest. Really, I had gone on into this movie, and I am just like, please don't tell me this is just going to be a movie that is to be carried by both Amelia and Samuel. And surefire enough, they're carrying this movie. Really, I couldn't have just wanted to see the villain more or hoped that the villain was to win out here more than any other horror movie that I've ever seen in my life. This movie is about as intriguing as a baby screaming in a airplane. That's how just fascinating this movie is to me. Is about as equally as satisfying or fascinating as a baby crying on an airplane, and you're probably on a 12-hour plane going somewhere. So going into this film, this is a pointless movie to watch because really you would probably get a headache after watching it, or you would probably just go on to be like, why did I watch this? Really, there's a interesting concept out of this movie, but there's nothing beyond that. There isn't enough time for us to get to see the Babadook character, and really, he just goes on to just continue to scare these people. And really, all the heavy lifting is going on between Amelia to be the bad guy in this story instead of it actually being the Babadook. So we go on and we have Amelia, who is a horrible parent and is to be a lazy parent, and we really have the whole reasoning for that being is because she is to have problems sleeping, be an insomniac, and so we have to give her all the leeway in the world simply because she's an insomniac and she can't sleep, and so that's the laziness of how she is to go on and carry herself in this film with not a care in the world because she can't sleep. We also have a kid who is a Dennis the Menace nightmare of a kid that is just seemingly. And I don't know how this kid has all of these weapons at hand to the point of him almost bringing a crossbow to a school, and how this kid is immediately expelled forever. And how like either like the police aren't being called, or we really just have it to where like this kid isn't immediately to be sent to child services right away is just baffling to me. um, because evidently if her mother just can't wrangle this kid, someone else should. Because god dang, we have a kid who is Samuel, who is to be this severely needy kid that is to go on and desperately need so much attention. It's redonkulous. And I say redonkulous in a very funny way of going about here, but it's true. This kid is to desperately just like, ma, 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 like that kid for like a whole movie. And so we have this kid going on and hurting other kids in this movie. We go on and eventually have a mother who is to go and hurt her own pet in this film, to the point of me just going like, wow, like again, Scream 2022. Thanks for recommending me this film. Man, I can't wait to also go and watch Hereditary, which I saw part of that film and then gave up. I watched part of Hereditary and then just gave up, just because I was like, man, this movie is so slow to the crawl. Kind of like all the Conjuring films, because this feels like a Conjuring kind of film. Uh, but a Conjuring film that I'm just like, man, when is somebody else going to come into frame besides Amelia and Samuel here? Because at some point we have this kind of old lady who is called Mrs. Roach here. We have at some points where Amelia is to go off to her work. I'm like, oh, some change of scenery. That's all that I could really rest on, is when they go on and are anywhere outside of this house, because it seems that Amelia and Samuel and this house is to be like a bulk of what goes on in the film. So I'm just kind of desperate to eventually get a change of pace at some point in this film. So yeah, a brand new category for rating a film is to be put into Babadook. I could say that this has a good concept, but other than that, I would love to actually get this movie remade and have it not exactly be like this film. Like, take the concept, but toss everything away. Go and do something else that leads into almost like a Nightmare on Elm Street kind of thing, where the kid is to consistently bring the book to show and tell, or a number of other things, that is to all of a sudden get this whole neighborhood who is to be afraid of this Babadook like character. So that way you could go on and have the Babadook being shown a lot more than what is to be shown in this film. Uh, so yeah, that's all that I think that I wanted to say about this movie. Just really a one of those movies that I guess you just have a movie that probably could be appealing by concept alone. So, with that said, let's go out of our way to just go into spoilers about this one. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. So, why did I spend 10 minutes on the cryptic sense of this movie? Well, I basically teed it up and whatever, but I pretty much almost explained this movie also. So, maybe more than likely that'll be a thing for people like, okay, I got it all. Um, so let's go on and let's go into the more detailed specifics about this movie. So it seems that we have, of course, Amelia, who is to be having night terrors because she has to go on and replay uh, this accident that was to take her husband away from her. And so that turns around and has Amelia having problems sleeping. And so this girl, I guess, had supposedly has problems sleeping for the last 7 years because we have Claire going on and talking to Amelia about like, well, hey, like Amelia, you should really get past this. And like it was 7 years ago. I'm like, holy crap, this woman is still clutching onto this thing 7 years later and is still having these horrible nightmares and being an insomniac and can't sleep. Why did this take so long for her to just snap and lose her mind now? You would have thought this would have happened a lot freaking sooner. But I guess that's just me. So we go on and we, of course, have Amelia that is to eventually have her kid run around like crazy, go on and eventually have this catapult weapon that that is to be like this backpack kind of thing where this catapult like thing is to launch these balls. And I'm thinking like, okay, that could be a smart thing if you possibly have a dog, but we have this kid just always using this backpack indoors, this catapult backpack indoors. And so we go on and we have this kid at some points like breaking windows and doing all kinds of just awful things because he has free reign basically to do whatever he wants. So we go on at some point and we have kind of Amelia whenever anyone is to kind of have something to like kind of bring to the table here. We have Amelia who's kind of either shutting people down or like saying how bad they are, and they could have like said a lot more worse things to her because technically she deserves it. So, because we of course have all of a sudden Amelia having to run off to her son's school because Samuel is to bring a crossbow basically to school. And we have it to where these people at the school are going on and like, well, they're like, well, hey, like, we're not going to go on and like punish him or whatever. We're just like, we're going to have him just go and have someone come in and monitor him, just kind of basically wrangle your child because heaven forbid you could do that. And so we go on and we have Amelia who is telling these people, it's like, well, hey, like, so you're going on and you're telling me that you just want to like figure out a way to like get rid of my kid or whatever, or like to try to like monitor my kid and have him basically be like on a leash, on a short leash. And like that's like since you're saying that my kid is too hard to handle, you're gonna go and try to subdue him somehow by having this monitor person present. That's that's what I kind of get from what Amelia is kind of tossing back on these people. And you know what? I would have really just expelled this kid immediately. Like that's like what the thing that he brought in was to basically be the equivalent of bringing a gun into a school. And so this is basically a deadly weapon that his mother is just consistently allowing him to have. And so really that should have just been like expelled right away. Like your kid is a awful kid and you need to actually parent him because you just aren't. To where eventually we just have Amelia who just goes on and is to just continue to not parent her kid. So we go on and we have this kid who seems to be almost like very hyperactive, where we go on and we now have Amelia who is to eventually go on and have to like consistently watch over her kid when she is not going on and having to go to work. Amelia goes on and is to work at this elderly home where slowly but surely it seems that she is to not really care about her job. To the point of her going on and having some bingo session where she's just saying random things like 5 billion, 5 billion, anybody? Like, who cares? Cause, and all of a sudden her superiors to walk in on Amelia going on and doing this whole bingo session and really just like, okay, you're not going to be the bingo person anymore. So we go on and we have Amelia who is meeting up with some other, I think, orderly guy who I think is named Robbie. And so we go on and have this guy talking with Amelia, and like he's being a really nice guy. At some point, when Robbie's to find out that Amelia's sick, Robbie goes to eventually go to Amelia's house and brings uh, Samuel a model plane because I guess this kid was, of course, to be sick also. So we go on and at some point have Amelia who is to go and trying to find a book for them to read together to hope that they can eventually go to sleep at night. So the very first book I believe is the Three Little Pigs, and so they end up reading that story. And so all of a sudden, weirdly, we again have horrible parenting being done by Amelia because all of a sudden Samuel just has this random book that Amelia is just like, well, how is it that you just have this book? And Samuel's like, well, I'm picking it. And so Amelia just goes on and it's just to read this book, like, oh, okay, like, I guess this book is to be just horrific enough for me to read to you. So we go on and we have Amelia, like, we have this story to not be like the best uh, of course, for a little kid, uh, but it is what it is anyway. So Amelia starts rattling off this book, and it's the Babadook book. And so she goes on and continues to read it and read it and read it. And then all of a sudden, her son is getting nightmares. I'm like, well, of course. Uh, we end up having at some point Amelia is to desperately try to like please herself underneath her sheets, let's just say. And all of a sudden her son is to be coming storming in and like, Mom, the Babadook, and like Amelia's like, okay, just like come into bed and we'll sleep together because this kid is to just consistently have nightmares about the Babadook. So yeah, we have this woman who is to just like, yeah, be the best mom because at some point she has to do something, right? So she has to just kind of just like, hey, like give me a minute here. So we go on, and so this kid is to basically go on and do a number of things and blame the Babadook for doing everything. We have at some point where Samuel is to go to a party, and some girl is to mention that, hey, I already have this doll, and her mother is just like, well, like, well, now they have twins. Now you have a twin. I'm like, so in other words, it's just like, well, like, be happy that I gave you something. I guess that's usually the Christmas gift present. I guess is like, hey, just be happy you got something. So, so we go on here, and eventually we have all the mothers going and talking together. And so one of the mothers are going and talking to Amelia, and mentioning that, like, oh yeah, I used to right, I would go on and do some kind of outreach programs, and talk to some women and help them out, who are kind of to be kind of widowed, and whatever. And like, I think she ends up calling it something else, but I would just call it widowed. And so we have it to where this one mom is to mention that she is to be so busy that she doesn't really even have time to go to the gym anymore. And Amelia is like, oh well, like I guess you're doing so well that you can't even go to the gym anymore. Really, just saying that this woman probably doesn't even have time for her children, because she probably isn't to ever really be at home. Uh, and I guess Amelia having to always be just locked down with her son at all times, and like she's actually saying that, oh well, I guess I'm a real mother besides you are, which really isn't the case, because neither one of them are probably much of mothers to their actual kids. So being honest, so we eventually have it to where Claire is to now confront Amelia, because she at this point is tired of Amelia going on and mentioning that Amelia really needs to seek help at this point, because it's been 7 years since her husband has dead, or has been dead. And so she's kind of like, it seems like she still hasn't moved on, and it seems like she still is to not be all that happy, so she needs to go and find somebody that can help her. And so we kind of have Amelia lashing out here, and to the point where all of a sudden we have Samuel, who's going and talking to, I guess, Claire's daughter in this tree house. And eventually what happens is, we have Samuel, who's mentioning that the Babadook is going to hurt this girl and kill this girl and whatever. And so Claire's daughter is to start lashing out, and eventually hurting Samuel's feelings. So Samuel just knocks this kid out of the treehouse, and of course, I think she ends up possibly breaking her nose. So we have Claire going and grabbing this kid and telling Amelia, like, hey, like, go and watch these kids. Like, you can do that at least, right? So, because Claire is scrambling to go to the hospital and to check on her daughter and to see if this girl's nose is broken or whatever. So, we go on, and every bit of time we have this kid mentioning that the Babadook is to do everything. Uh, Kicking against this seat numerous times over. Again, like anything that you would probably see at an airport or airplane some point, where a kid would just be this restless kid, because this kid is to just be hyper all the time. So we push on into this movie, and so we have at some points where Amelia is to start to even start to see this Babadook like character crawling upon her wall. Uh, we have at some point there is to be a hole uh, that cockroaches are to be coming out of it. And so, uh, really, when we turn back around and have Amelia look at that, all of a sudden, like, the hole is gone. And this is right around the time that child services is to be called, because this is shortly after this party, where all of a sudden these they call them something differently in this movie. they call it community service like people, but like to me it looks more like child services where they're really looking into this girl because they're like, yeah, this woman has been like, we've been hearing some reports about this woman. So we go on and we eventually have it where Amelia is slowly but surely losing her mind. And like there is a really interesting moment like 15 minutes in where Amelia at some point is desperately trying to sleep, and Samuel is to mention that they're running out of food, and that Samuel wants his mother to go out and get some kind of food. And Amelia turns around and it's like, well, hey, like, if you want to eat food so badly, eat your own, eat your own crap. And because all you do is talk, 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 talk. So shut up and go and eat your own crap and just leave me be. So then all of a sudden, Amelia turns around and is to eventually regret what she had said to her own son. Uh, but she is to consistently complain about sleeping to the point where both Amelia and Samuel are going to, of course, the doctor, and Amelia is desperately asking this doctor for some kind of medication, which eventually is to have the doctor call them a sedative. But we have Samuel who's mentioning that it's a tranquilizer. So we have at some point where child services is to arrive and check in on Amelia and Samuel here because this kid has not gone to school within a number of days. So we go on here and we, of course, have it where that's when Amelia is to mention this wall and that there was a hole in the wall, and I guess she had supposedly sprayed for bugs, but like we just have these characters just having at some points or another bugs crawling on them at some point of this movie, telling us that they're freaking crazy. So, and because we have another scene where Amelia is to crash her car and bugs are kind of crawling all over her. So we go on, and so Samuel throughout this movie is to consistently recite the Babadook parts of the book, and to go on here and I don't know, I'm kind of all over the place because like this movie is just like, okay, just kind of remember all the pieces instead of the movie as a whole. Because at some point it just kind of like goes off the rails and it gets even more escalatingly crazy. So at some point we eventually have it where the Babadook is to basically be possessing Amelia, and we really have some kind of Linda Blair almost kind of moments here in this film. And so when Amelia at some point is to go and sit by the TV and watch the TV because she just still can't sleep. And so we have at some point where Sam is to go on and see his mother, and we all of a sudden have Samuel that is to go on and try to talk to his mother, and he is to realize that this isn't really his mother anymore. And so we go on at some point and have Samuel go on and fight with Amelia, going and using the number of weapons that he is to have at his disposal. The weird, goofy slingshot or cannon, or what is it? The one backpack thing, the weird, goofy backpack thing that is to chuck that ball. He ends up using that against his mother. He ends up using this little crossbow against his mother, and he goes and finds his kitchen knife and goes and stabs into his mother. Because we have at one point where Amelia was to go and tell Samuel that no one is going to hurt Samuel because Amelia won't allow it, because she is to have this kitchen knife and basically say that like no one's coming in here. like in a very horrified like manner. Like this girl is just like on to her last straw. So we go on and eventually have it to where, of course, Amelia is to kill her own pet and then go on and to go after her son in this basement, where eventually he is to go and tie her up, and eventually Amelia is to choke her own son. That's what happens in this film. So, I don't want to mention it, but it happens. So, we go on here and eventually force Amelia to realize that she is possessed by this Babadook, and so she ends up going on and barfing up this blood. I'm assuming it's blood because it looks either black or like a reddish black. So we're assuming or assessing that she is to go on and release this Babadook from out of her, and then eventually we have it where Amelia is going and taking her child and holding on to him and going on and telling this Babadook to go away, that he's nothing, that really this point she is to basically think that she can like scare this thing away, but this thing is all too powerful to just get scared off here, because his character is basically the boogeyman. I don't think that this thing is just going to easily go away. Uh, but we had Amelia going on and trying everything. She went on to go and take this Babadook book, and she at first went on and tore it up and put it in the garbage for this book to come back, and it's vastly different. Now saying that in the pages that the Babadook is praying over Amelia, and that eventually Amelia will go on and kill her own child. So we go on, and we of course have Amelia that is to go and burn up this book, and then is to all of a sudden get a phone call from the Babadook, and is like, "Book, Babadook, yeah, hey, how's it going? I'm trying to scare you." So we go on and have Amelia go to the police station where these people don't believe at all her story. And we all of a sudden have Amelia seeing the some Babadook outfit in the back of this police station, as if like Amelia is thinking that the Babadook is working for them. Maybe he, maybe he's a rough justice detective that goes on and during the day scares the out of Amelia and Samuel, but at night he's this rough justice detective that goes on and is to like solve all the tough cases. So, so when Amelia is to go on and talk to this detective, and she is to go on and be like, yeah, like this guy is like calling me late at night, and he had sent me this book, and every time I try to destroy it, it just comes back, and the pages are more and more disturbing. And so like, well, do you have the book? And she's like, well, no, I burnt the book. And so they're like, well, what can we do? Like, there's no proof of what you're saying. There's no there's no way we could possibly easily track this guy down. What do you expect us to do? Like, this isn't seemingly a physical person that you can eventually point out to us, oh, this is the guy, or whatever. So they're just like, what are we expected to do here? So Amelia is realizing that the police won't help her, and I guess she doesn't go on to go to her church as a last resort thing, because evidently she has never seen The Conjuring or The Exorcist or any number of other things to eventually just get rid of this monstrous being. Because I guess maybe this movie wasn't around by the time that The Exorcist was already out, so Why wouldn't this person just turn for religion to help? Or, like, I guess really moving to any other house would not have worked because this thing would have continued to follow her. So, towards the end of the movie, we just have it to where Amelia is to go on and try to come up with a way to deal with this Babadook being in her house. Going and tossing a bunch of worms to him, and the Babadook is, I guess, to consume these worms. So, Amelia is to go on and look happy and look nice for these child services benefit. Mentioning that today is, of course, to be Samuel's birthday, and they're celebrating it. And Samuel is to mention that he's never had a birthday party before because supposedly uh, bef- uh, Samuel's dad had died coincidentally on Samuel's birthday, and so that's why they never celebrated. And so, really, we just have Amelia that is still, like, I guess, celebrating it now just because it's like, oh, well, she wants to look good in front of these child services people. So that way they don't collect her kid. And more than likely, it's like, I'm sorry, Amelia, don't you realize that you're technically putting your son in a dangerous situation? Maybe it's better off if you actually give your kid away to this child services if you cannot actually have your kid and you move out of this situation and eventually get rid of this Babadook. Maybe your kid would have been safer with going into child services and eventually have whatever happens to you happens. Uh, But at some points we have uh, like that one joke where Amelia is to mention that she's going to the ward, and Robbie's like, "Well, I don't think that's going to happen to you for a number of years." Like, we'll see about that in this movie, because this girl is eventually at some point probably gonna, like, she's already snapped at some point and gone on and done and said some horrific things to her son, and that was just like the beginning of her Babadook trials. Uh, so, so yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything left to talk about here. I ended up talking about this movie in a roundabout way, but anyways, yeah. I think I covered a bulk of this movie. There might have been certain scenes here or certain stuff that I could have gone further on about, or I didn't go into heavily detail, or not everything is absolutely correct. But really, this movie I wouldn't recommend it either. So people are like, oh yeah, I want to hear more about this awful story. I want to hear more about this awful movie. Um, so yeah, with that said, I think most of this is covered. We have at some point where Amelia is to eventually see her husband come back to her, I guess possibly in a dream. But then all of a sudden, this father's head ends up getting his head lobbed off, and he falls over dead. I'm like, what the is this? Man, this film just goes into weird, odd directions, and we don't really actually see the Babadook all that well either. We just kind of see like him as really just this shadowy figure, or we just kind of see like arms or pieces of him, but not him completely, because I guess that's the point of this film, is for us to not really see this character, and we're just kind of really the only time that we could probably see this character is probably on a TV screen that is kind of like little flashes of edited things on footage, and that's really about it. But even that is just kind of flimsy. Or really, what we are to really just see here is to be what's in the book, is to be the visual of this character. So, so yeah, I feel like I've covered most of this film. It's like 89 some odd minutes, so it's a very short, brief film. So that was the kind of the easy thing for me to like. Heck yeah, like an hour and 20 some odd minute film. That's gonna be easy to review today. But then I realized, like 9 minutes in, I was like, man, this isn't gonna be the easiest thing to review because just wham 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 for freaking Samuel. Uh, and so Amelia is trying to wrangle her kid and to try and eventually, like, she never, like, it seems like it seems like Amelia is disciplining her kid, but not really. Like, I was just expecting for this kid to eventually get injured or injure someone else or eventually get away with murder at some point. And I don't know, it just, like, you would have thought eventually the Babadook would have went after the kid and not the mother. But I guess it was like whatever was the easiest bait to go into for this thing. So, with that said, I think that's all that I wanted to talk about in this movie. I think I got everything that I wanted to say out of here. So I think I'm going to get out of here. So goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.